Ah, hello,
Hello. Hello, Leah.
Kalila.
We made it.
We did.
Well, hello, loves, and all of you who are part of the Priestess Presence community and sisterhood, and all of you who are part of Leah's community, and anyone else that happens to be watching us. We had planned to do a Facebook live stream today, and the technical gods snafu'd us and got in the way. We couldn't manage to figure it out. So we're instead making this recording to share with you. And I think our intention, Leah, on this offering is to dive a little bit deeper into why we're offering this upcoming workshop on how to tell a bigger story and what inspired us to create that. So can you share the full title of our upcoming workshop? Because I don't have it in my head and it's not in front of me, and I know you probably have it there.
You know what's great? It's been morphing and changing.
That's why I'm asking you to share it. I don't know what the most current iteration is that we came up with.
And I think that really speaks to exactly what it is. I feel like what we're doing is we are surfing the times that we're living in, and how do we meet the moment, and how do we ride this current. And so our language has been morphing and shifting as we keep listening and listening deeper into how to be of service at this moment in time. Mm-hmm. And so initially the course was called How to Tell a Bigger Story, Awakening the Voices of Women for Transformation. And then we kind of refined it. We went to awakening the stories of women. And then it went to, transforming trauma, alchemizing pain. It's morphed, as we really kind of get into this expanded space. And I think that what inspired me, and I'll just speak to what inspired why I reached out to you, was as I was looking at the Me Too movement and receiving all the stories on social media, but then receiving all the stories from my dear friends on the other side of it that were being like, I'm being traumatized and traumatized and traumatized again, either from having their own wounds resurfaced or from hearing another sister's stories that are still very alive in the trauma. And as a storyteller and as really a story listener, I started to really look at, I think the big question, how do we bring our unique gifts to the moment that we're in? And it really came to how do I help people bring their stories forward in a way that really captures the wisdom, the insight, the teaching, so that we're talking more about the trauma, but also bringing it as a gift so that it doesn't have to be repeated. And I really wanted to come to you because of your expertise working with women who've gone through trauma, because I really knew that when you walk across this kind of threshold and you open these kinds of gates, all different kinds of things appear. And it was really important for me to be able to hold this field of intention with someone that was really skilled and talented and capable and experienced with the breadth and that could hold the breadth of what might show up.
Yeah, beautiful. So the event that Leah and I have come up with is a day-long storytelling workshop for women, all women, and we were talking about who is this for, and it's really for all women, all ages, all ethnicities, all levels of experience with story, all women who have a story to tell. And I think that means all of us. Because one of the things that when Leah reached out to me, that occurred to me about the movement, the moment that we're living in, is that the stories that we've heard through the Me Too movement, through Christine Balsey-Ford coming through with her story, through the vagina monologues, through this sort of resurgence, re-emergence of the feminine voice in our culture, is what we've discovered is that we share something in common, which is the majority, and I'm not going to say all because that's a blanket statement, but the majority of women that you speak to, that I speak to, myself included, have a history, have a lifetime experience of infractions, of violations, of harassments, of moments when they didn't feel safe in the world that is led by the patriarchy. In our relationships with the masculine, whether it's men that we've known or men that we don't know. And I think one of the greatest healings that's happening for us right now is that these stories are being heard for the first time. And they're being spoken for the first time often. And they're not stories necessarily all of, and this is a trigger warning for you, but all of rape or abuse or molestation or any of that. They're stories of moments in our lives when we, because we were women, felt unsafe, because we are in female form, have felt at the object of another person's indiscretion, lack of sensitivity, lack of awareness, and in some cases, obviously, outright abuse. And the breadth and width and depth of those stories that have emerged are profound. And Leah actually reached out to me, I think it was around the moment that the Kavanaugh hearings were going on, and I had watched part of the testimony from Dr. Ford. And I was in a moment of shock, actually, at my own inner reaction as to what happened in my own body. Because as I was listening to her, what happened for me was the resurgence of memories of being around teenage boys who are either intoxicated or just in their testosterone, and being the object of their laughter, the object of their attention, the object of their desire to feel their power and their prowess, right? And that was due to the fact that I had a brother who was 2.5 years older than me, and he had a whole bunch of friends, and they would all come around the house. And at that point in my life, my dad, I was raised by my dad, he was not in the house very much. He was kind of out and gone, and he left the house to them. It was like Lord of the Flies. He left the house to the kids. And so there was these experiences. And when you asked me to come in and co-create this with you, I was like, yes, it's really needed. We need a space to be held by one another, but also a space where we can actually interact with that story and find the strength, the power, the healing, the humanity, the humility within it. And that part of what Leah and I have been co-creating as this has been morphing and taking form within us is a living, breathing storytelling temple where we can come to remember that we're all here as I want to say, as the writer, the scripter of our story, that we're here with the ability to decide how we'll tell that story and what that story means. And in my own life, as a therapist in the world of psychotherapy, I did a tremendous amount of work on narrative therapy and the whole notion of restoring our lives, and how powerful, particularly when we've had a traumatic experience, that is at a certain point in our healing, to be able to restore our narrative. And so that's why I'm here, is because I know the power from a therapeutic standpoint, from a dramatic standpoint, from a mythic standpoint, from a deep priestessing standpoint, of what it means for us as women to gather our voices together. And so, Leah, I want to thank you for inviting me to collaborate with you. And yeah, that's why I'm inspired to step into this with you.
I'm so honored. And it's like, for those of you who don't know, I got to, sit with Elaine Kalila in a 13 Moon Circle many, many years ago. It was in that space where I really came alive as a sacred storyteller, where I really got to explore what does it mean to walk the path of holding story as a sacred act, and it took me really deep into my own studies and scholarship, and really getting to know stories as living entities. It's like understanding that there are these things that we're in relationship to, and yes, they're through things that happen to us and the ways that we live our lives. And then the way that they continue to live in our lives is strangely and bizarrely kind of up to us and the story that we tell. And what I've been discovering in this process is like, what is it to come into relationship with our story? And what is it to come into, the reason why I was really inspired to tell a bigger story was because when we come, there's a different processes. You were just speaking about, wow, we're in this extraordinary moment in time when we're witnessing each other for the very first time. As a side note, I started to realize me, the storyteller, was so shy to tell my story because I didn't think that it had a place in our time. You know, it wasn't traumatic enough. It wasn't bad enough.
Uh-huh.
These are the stories where the first time we're hearing the stories that no one's been willing to listen to or able to listen to. And as I started to, in preparation for this workshop, started to write what my story is, I started to learn that I've been taught all these things. And I was like, oh my gosh, because of the shame involved with never having to talk about this kind of sexual harassment or trespass, I don't want to repeat those stories, then I also don't get to repeat all this extraordinary teaching and learning that I received in the expression of this. And that if I could only pass these on to these 13, 15-year-old girls who are in my world who are experiencing this for the first time, I was like, this is where the role of ancestry, of mentorship, of auntieship, of the extended family has gotten broken down. We require so much of our parents and so much of our teachers and not of the community village. And I feel like this is where we come alive again in understanding the power of our story, the need for our story, how meaningful our stories are.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, and then getting to be with our stories as these living beings, I learned that I learn from them. And I learn when I write them out and when I work with them and I work with the intention of I want to give this story, you know, and we talked before, there's a distinction. We asked the women that are coming to take some time to actually make sure that they've told, if they're coming with a specific instance, you know, of trespass, that we ask that you tell the story at least once, you know, and respect that. And we spoke a lot about this. You know, there's one thing if we were all in a group and we could take you into our arms and we could hold you and really be with you, but we need to be realistic with with this technology, this amazing technology that brings us together, but not, you know, each other. So we wanted to make sure that you were at a certain point in your own beingness where you have told the story, you know, preferably up to 3 times, you know, but at least once. So this is not your first time being witnessed, because that's a really specific part of the process. It's so important that we need to so honor and respect. And so if you're feeling the call to this, but you haven't had a chance to tell your story before, we really say, find someone or 2 people and ask them to come close to you for an evening and ask for some special time to listen and prepare them and say, I need to be witnessed in something. And maybe you don't need to hear them say anything. You need their feedback. You don't need them to comment or ask questions even. Sometimes at this stage, you really just need to be heard. So prepare your listener and say, I don't want you to tell me anything or make judgments or projections or what ifs or I wish had. What I need from you in this moment, I'm projecting all kinds of things that you need, but let's just say in this moment that it's just to be listened to. That's it. So you prepare your listener, you tell them their job so that they can really hold it in a good way for you. And if you can do that once or twice, you know, maybe even 3 times, that way when you come to the workshop, you've already crossed a certain threshold and you've gotten to hear your story a couple of different times. And the thing that I've learned, and Elaine, I'm sure you can speak to this too, is that sometimes we can get in this kind of road track where we repeat the same thing over again, repeat the story over and over again. And what we do is we kind of cut off the parts of us that have grown up since then, you know, and that we've changed since then. We know more since then, acquired so much more insight and knowledge. And so really allowing yourself to be so present in the story that those pieces can come in, you know? And then that's where we want to meet you. We want to meet you in really exploring a couple of different ways of telling your story, allowing the creative force to come through, allowing different formats so that you can find bigger and bigger and bigger ways to explore how you want to, as Linda was saying, how you want to live within your story. Because we get to shift and change. It's kind of this amazing, it's magic. It's magic.
Yeah.
It's not changing what happened. It's not changing what's happened, but it's allowing you to grow within the expression of it and to respect the path of your soul within it. And it's good big work.
So I love that you're speaking this language, right, of how the story itself, the structure of story, as an ancient primordial structure that serves us in humanity, and it's an art, and it's a healing art, and there's a reason why we need stories. We need stories to help us to navigate through our lives. We need stories to go to when we're unclear of how to walk forward. And what I think, Leah, you're speaking to that's so powerful, and from, 25 years plus of being a psychotherapist and being on that path of healing deeply and listening to people's stories, right? That was my job, was to listen to stories and to find within it the possibility, and not the possibility, like you said, to change the story, because the story, whatever it is that's happened in our lives, we don't change that, but how we are with it now in this moment shifts the story. And we come to understand the story over time through different eyes. And I think I want to talk to this a little bit in terms of, if I was to put on my trauma therapist hat for just a moment, and not that this is a trauma therapy workshop, because it's not at all.
Yeah, I just want to, can I just jump into this one spot before you get to that, which is that we did say, like, whose stories do we tell? Is it all people who've had really extreme situations? Yeah. And we realized in our own conversation was, oh no, this is for everybody. This is really for everybody who feels the call to learn how to talk about this in our time, and to learn how to tell their stories. And I'll just say, we've started, the people that have registered, we've started to get their surveys of who they are. And some people know what story they want to tell, and some people don't. They just, I want to learn how to do this.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for saying that. But I wanted to kind of do a holographic kind of mapping for a moment around how we move from pain to power, to use that very simple, very direct terminology that really comes out of Eve Ensler's work in the Vagina Monologues. And I did a lot of work with her in the last few years. And one of the things that I spoke with her a lot about was, what is it that moves someone from pain to power? Because there's a process, right? And that's a process that's held intrinsically within the storytelling kind of format of how we work with a story. But you named it. So one of the things that we're going to be doing in the workshop is, first of all, joining together in a circle of like-minded beings who are all being called to step into some bigger version of the story that they carry, to find a way to live into the mythic level, the level whereby we can understand what the teaching is from the story, right? So that's the first part. The second part is, you've named it there, is that in our healing of whatever's happened, whatever infractions, violations, boundary overstepping, or trauma, big word trauma, right? So whatever scale you might be on, the first step is to be received into a community of loving beings. The second step is to be witnessed and believed, is to be heard and witnessed and received and believed in where you're at in the moment. And then the next steps unfold from that, which is really going through the process of feeling and being able to share the feeling states, and being able to share what was lost and what ultimately is found. And when I worked with Eve Ensler, I worked in Bukavu, Congo, in the City of Joy, which is, they've now got an amazing documentary out about this on Netflix. If anybody's curious about the work that's happening with women telling their stories, then really you should go there. And this is on the extreme side, obviously, because these women have been used as weapons of war. It makes my heart still break when I say those words. Gosh, yeah, I can feel it still in my own heart. But that changed my life. The story of my life was changed by those women, because with a much longer story that I won't tell now, but I was called, like a mythic call, that took me to the Congo for 5 years running to work with Eve Ensler and her organization there, and to be in collaboration with the staff team there of how can we help these women who've been desecrated reclaim the dignity of their story and move from pain to power. How can we do that? And it's that same sacred technology that I'm bringing forward here now and collaborating with Leah, that this has been a bedrock of my life. And as Leah said, it's not about the intensity of the story that you may have to share. This is about, all stories being welcome, and all experiences, whether feminine, in all of us has been negated or misunderstood or violated or minimized or not treated with respect. And those are the stories that we want to transform into our voice that says, not just that this is what's happening, this is what has happened, and this is who I am now. This is who I am now. And if I trace my own story back, what inspired me to have the call to go to the Congo? I mean, that's a massive life choice, right? I've never been to DRC Congo. It's one of the scariest places on the planet, let's be honest. And if I trace my steps back to my childhood, to my story, it was those violations from my brother. It was the masculine that violated and was abusive toward me, and that I was abusive in return, that cycle of abuse played itself out between us. But it was that's played out in my life that ultimately my redemption came through going to the Congo. Now that's a mythic level of a story, but the structure is the same thing. It doesn't matter from the micro to the macro, from the macro to the micro, we're following the same fractal of how we heal, of how we grow. And in the hero and heroine's journey, and I know this is your world completely, Leah, but on that journey, there's a call to adventure, and there's all these steps that we go along in the story, but the final part is the return to your community with the gift of your adventure. And so you can think about this day-long adventure that we're going to go on, where we're going to guide you together to go from the call, what's calling you to tell this story, all the way through those steps to come back with what the gift of it is that you might want to share with others in your life. And I know in my heart and in my blood and my breath and my blood bones, like my full being, that there is redemption in our stories. There is hope in our stories. There is that place of unknown to us in the moment different that can emerge. So I'll throw the ball back to you, darling, but I just wanted to share from, this different dimensions of experience, so you can get a flavor of not just the why, but the what, the how.
And I really appreciate that. And I don't think we need to say much more. And what you just said, I think, is so key. It just is the beauty. This is what the role of art brings to us. If there's anything that you could see, those amazing movie that says life is beautiful. I think it's called Life is Beautiful, and it tells
That's an intense movie, Leah.
Intense movie, and what it does is it shows how we can talk about the most horrible things in the world in the most beautiful way, so that they are like a gift to others, and there's such a difference. And so one of the things also is we'll get to talk about, what's your intention? What is it that you're wanting to give? What is the thing that you're wanting to carry forward? What is the thing that you want to transmute and alchemize? Because that's what it is, right? This alchemizing process of calling in from the earth, calling in from our body, coming in from spirit, our stories, and then how do we bring them to the world, and what is it that we're giving? And through the story and through the arts and through the creative process, we do create beauty out of the hardest things. And so as hearing you talk, I just kind of get a whole different element of excitement for this day. It's kind of a funny thing to be diving into, hard subjects, but in a really gentle, loving, caring, considerate, even a way that can be fun, and it can be playful in the discovery.
Yeah.
And, to be able to do this in the company of others, it's really something, and it's something that we don't often take the time out to do.
So I wanna say something here. Just it's Okay, so I'm just going to say this because it's rising up in my being. So one of the things I've learned over many, many years of sitting with difficult stories is to say these words, that in being with that story, there is an... Ooh.
Sorry.
Oh, you're getting some kind of warning.
I'm getting a warning. It's the first day of the month, so I'm going to assume it's 12 o'clock my time, and that's just a normal warning thing. Or it might not be, because it's not 12 o'clock. Okay.
There's a whole new story happening.
A whole new story happening. And I have to live in that. I just don't know what's happening until I know what's happening.
Okay. Well, then we will just let you sit in that story whilst I am sharing this piece that came to me to share with you, which is in sitting with difficult stories, and particularly before I stepped into the priestess presence work, you'll get this picture. I was a full-time trauma therapist. That's really what I did for my life. And I taught curriculums around recovering from trauma and all over the world. And so there's a way in which it's very versed in the process of what it takes to champion a story. And I want to say this, which is that when we come to be with a story of our lives, there is a place that I sit in always, that if that story was one that was scary and or hard and difficult for us on whatever level, that there is a place of holding for you in the circle where we absolutely hold the lensing of that should never have happened. That should never have happened to you. And there's a level at which our humanity has to sit with that with any story of abuse or any story of pain, that we hold the position of the deep grief and sorrow that happened. And that you did not deserve that, and in no way did you create that, choose that in terms of your volition, right? That's not what we're saying in any way in terms of working with your story. And I want to just say that because that can be a very sensitive place. But what we are saying is that these stories happen every single day. These stories are happening to women all over the planet. How do we find ourselves and our strength and our power to move through the story and to not be lost within the story, but to actually move to be able to stand within the story in a way that empowers us, that has us look at who we are now. And if I use a little example from my story with my brother growing up, it was a long journey for me to find my way back. But what I could at some point in that story understand, and this was my story, so this is not what I'm saying for everybody, but I got to understand how I repeated that pattern in my personal relationships for many years of being one side the abuser and then in the next being the victim. And I played that out for a long time, the victim perpetrator cycle, because that's what I learned. That was the story I had. And it wasn't until I realized I could leave that story as one who was classically in a domestic violence situation, which I had repeated in a number of relationships, to be completely candid, that I was both the victim and the perpetrator until I found a way out of that loop. I couldn't get a new story. I'm just going to say that because in my own life, the moment that I realized that I could choose a new story and I could actually walk away from the situation was the moment where I never repeated that story again, because it was no longer relevant to me.
And what I love about you speaking to that is you're speaking to something, and I wish I could make an animation of it, because there's this thing that we do with our story, which is there's the story, and then there's how we're living the story, and then we can actually we can move outside the story, and then that story lives within another story.
That's right.
And that's what we're doing right now. That's what we'll be doing together, is we'll be creating that bigger story of which that story lives inside of.
That's right.
And so we're not playing the same role out over and over again. I think this is a really important piece. It's also a really important piece in terms of how do we deal with trauma and storytelling. It's that it's not about going back to relive it over and over again and how you tell it, because that's not what we're doing. We're doing something else.
Right.
And so really and it's like I saw it so visually as you were speaking. Experience that there's the story, and then there's the story about the story, and then there's the story that we're living in right now.
Yeah.
And how do we work with this? So
that's right. And what I can speak to within that is the piece that I'm going to be bringing, because Leah really is the storytelling part. I mean, she's bringing all of those pieces because that's her world. And I'm training with her right now myself. So, you know, I'm her student actually, which is a beautiful, beautiful exchange of ideas and roles, right? And so what I'm bringing to this is that as we go through this day long, I'm going to be holding the biggest space of grounding us into our bodies, of breathing, of staying connected to what's happening in the here and now. And if anything should get triggered within you, which it might, right? Should anything happen, I'm going to be right there to assist and to create the space to come back to your center and to find your ground. And so you don't have to be worried about that part. That's why I'm coming. You know, it's part of the reason why we're collaborating on this is because we bring different skill sets. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to be inviting you to track yourself and to take care of yourself and to realize when you're, you know, in your story and when you're able to look at it from a wider lens. And we'll be doing some of that on the day long as well. So there'll be resources along the way, like you can think of it in that way. So you can come knowing that you're going to be held in both ways, both in the how to tell a story and then your well-being and how we're going to navigate that. Yeah.
I'm so excited.
I know, right? I know. So I'm excited. So let's just share a little bit about when it is. So it's November 10th. It's coming right up. Do you want to share a few details about the actual day and how that's going to look, Leah?
Sure. So, you know, basically you will be online, and as you read
in this exact format, actually, on Zoom, right?
Yeah, it's on Zoom. And what's also kind of cool about Zoom is that you can see everybody. So you will actually be able to see all of us there together. Right. You do have this kind of weird feeling of being connected through the pixels. And it's going to be nicely spread out so that you get a little bit of teaching from me, a little bit of teaching from Kalila. You'll get to have an opportunity to do work in small groups. So the amazing thing about this technology is that we can actually you'll have like a small group that you can work with. You'll have an opportunity to do solo writing time and actually then come back and share it in your small groups. Then we'll come back as a big group. So it's kind of like being at a workshop in terms of being all together, having some solo time and having group time. And then what you'll also do is bring you through several different modalities and techniques of telling your story. Mm-hmm. So, you know, we'll do the narrative of that we're kind of used to. This is what happened, you know. We'll put in some artistic, creative elements that really kind of help you shape a beautiful story, you know, a little bit of craft in there. And then I'll also show you how to put it into a mythic form. And to me personally, this has been one of the most profoundly healing modalities of exploring the story, where I get out of the, you know, Michael Meade, one of our most amazing modern day mythologists, like, you know, behind this dimension is the mythic dimension. So when we talk about symbols and all those things, it's like how we are here lives in this other dimension in another form. And allowing to see how our story is playing out in that dimension brings on this whole other perspective and freedom and liberation and looking at the story in a much bigger way. So I think I sent everyone who's registered an example of a story like that.
You did. It was beautiful.
The feeling of it, just for inspiration. Normally I don't like for anyone to have that, but because we only have one day, I wanted you to have a little bit of food in the coffer, as they say, to inspire you before we do that. So it should be lovely.
Beautiful. So it's starts at 10 a.m. We'll put the link in the comments below this video so that you can join along with some other information. We'll put it in the body of this offering, so you'll be able to read a little bit about it as well. And if you want to register, we're offering this at the fee of 111. That's the heart contribution. And what I want to say to that is if you are seeing this and 111 is totally out of your range and you know you need to be here, then just email myself or Leah, and perhaps Leah, you'll put your email in there so people can email you and let you know And we do have some scholarships that we can give out, and we don't want to turn anyone away for lack of funds, because essentially we want to have women in the room with us who are motivated and really desire to learn this beautiful ancient modern future technique of storytelling in service to our own growth and healing, but also to that final step on the mythic journey where you bring back something to your community. And I think for us as women, that's a lot of what we are being called to. Many of us are being called to bring back something that can illuminate another way forward than the ways that we have seen currently in our culture, the repetitive stories. And so I'm excited to do this. It's been fun to talk to you about it, Leah. Yay. Blessed be. So we'll put all the links here for you. If you've got questions, you can reach out via email too. But it's pretty straightforward, and it's pretty much all the information is on the page. Once you register, you'll get an email that welcomes you and gives you all the details that you're going to need. And then we'll send a reminder out before the day about what you need to bring with you and all of that good stuff. And we'll be live. And if you happen to not be available on November 10th, we will be recording the whole thing. And obviously, it's a little different than coming live, but you could still get great benefit from attending later at your own timeline. And for anybody who comes to this, obviously we'll be offering them the replay to keep in their own library so they can go back and look at it again, because there's going to be a lot that's shared. So you might want to have it and be able to refer to it in your own library. All right. I think we're complete. Anything else you want to say, Leah?
Nope.
Perfect.
Just that I'm
so we'll see.
No bombs have dropped, so I think.
I know, right? That's a really good sign. That story's ending well. God. All right, my dears. Blessings. Lovely to be with you for this time, and we will see you on the 10th.
Sounds good. Okay.